Um, what the first, I should say who Chris and Sally are. And Chris and Sally are not real people. They're personas developed by Loughborough University. And the idea was that of Loughborough's research was that the personas, including Chris and Sally, would embody classic combinations of physical cognitive impairment. So in a sense, they became for us a sort of virtual client or an imaginary client. And working with the Building Research Establishment, they wanted to have a demonstration project which could be visited and, experimental and evolving in terms of ways of dealing with the issues people have in their home. But one of the most important principles in Chris and Sally's house and the design was that we wanted to design a house which was a house that anybody could live in and be attractive for people to live in. We didn't want to design something which was like a special needs unit or something that looked clinical or stood out as being different. So that's one of the drivers of the scheme. The other thing that we did was that we were given effectively what was part of an old stable block, actually originally Victorian stable block, two bays of it, and hardly ideal, got all sorts of complicated roof shapes and things like that. But on the other hand, this is the reality of adaptation, isn't it? You're not given an ideal world. You've got to deal with the problem as it presents itself. So we went through a process with Loughborough and IF and the BRE, and looking at a whole series of design options and selecting down until we had a preferred option. And the basic concept of this was, well, we've got an old stable block, but it's a two-room building, basically. So it's a bit like a two-room house, and a two-room terraced house is an archetype that's very typical in this country. So if we have an imaginary house to deal with and an imaginary client, then we can progress the project in a way that tries to respond to the real world as we find it. And one of the other main objectives here is that to achieve a design response which can assist people living with dementia to continue to live in their own homes, sustaining their capacity for longer as members of the community. And this is really part of a logic that we discussed with the NHS at an early stage. And what's obviously the case is that there's a lot of people in hospital beds that perhaps don't need to be in hospital beds if housing as a whole was designed in a more compatible way for them to live, and for them to be adaptable to future needs. So I won't go into every detail of taps and things like that, but this is the some illustrations of the scheme. So on the right hand side there, we can see the ground floor plan and the first floor plan as adapted. And there's the first thing about it is that it's we've knocked walls down and things to make it an open plan, easy to navigate, easy to get a wheelchair around and to be walkable. So when you enter the house, you can achieve a good visibility, good navigability of how you're going to find things, how it's going to work. That was a key principle. And on the ground floor, then we have a bathroom on the ground floor, shower room, and a kitchen on the right there and a living room on the left, and upstairs we've got a bed, 2 bedrooms, a master bedroom, and another bathroom. We have a lift joining the 2, and I think what was I going to say? The detail here incorporates lots of the features that Mary talked about: the glass-fronted cupboards and the crosshead taps and things like that. So we're trying to get the detail right, and actually getting the detail right is not that easy at all. Some of the issues. Some of the issues are things like the supply chain, and obviously within there is an industry, part of the industry, which is to do with extra care schemes, and the extra care schemes tend to have a supply chain which will give you light reflectance values and the sort of things that you would need in that kind of scheme or in a hospital setting. There's a supply chain. In terms of domestic, it's not so easy at all. Those crosshead taps, you wouldn't be able to go into a showroom and buy crosshead taps. They're just not in the market. You can get them, but you have to search for them. Things like furniture. The furniture for the unit was sponsored by John Lewis, very, very kindly. But of course, if you start talking to John Lewis about light reflectance values and things like that, then it's just blank. There's no conception. There's no expression on their products of what the light reflectance value might be. So, and then we used paints that have a light reflectance value dementia sort of category. But of course, the colours, when you test the colours aren't necessarily what it says in the tin in terms of light reflectance value. So there's issues in the supply chain that would need quite a bit more sorting out. So what happened next? We finished off the Chris and Sally's house. There were a few group visits. People came around, and we'd had some feedback in that respect. But of course, then along came COVID and lockdown, and that the house couldn't be able to the public anymore, so it was closed down. And we were all quite sad about that, because all these lessons learned were embodied in the house. So Eve and I and Mike Riley from John Moores got together and thought, well, what we need to do is to record the experience in the form of a book. And so this is designed for dementia. The book, it's also available as an ebook. And I think what the strength of the book is that it combines a lot of research and evidence base in a very comprehensive way, but it's also practically orientated. So it has this design best practice in it from our interdisciplinary team at HLP. So it has that bridge in it, which I think is very valuable. And there's a few key questions there of what can be done in practice to assist people living with dementia to live at home as part of the community and retaining capacity for longer. And there's detailed findings from the research along with practical examples. And then we wanted to go on how can the tools and insights inform the wider context of housing design. And obviously the practices are involved day-to-day basis in doing housing designs, but putting these neurodiversity cognitively impaired design responses into new housing design is also quite difficult, partly because it's not tangible. It's perceived by clients as being an extra cost, an extra complication. And it's not in the compliance, it's not in the rule book, the tick box to do this. So why should they? So that's one of the challenges that we've got at the moment. I think the other thing is that obviously when we're designing built environments, particularly public realm type of things, well, there are other groups in the community besides people living with dementia. So people living with autism, we've done research into autism, people who are sight impaired, physically disabled, neurodiverse issues. And obviously when you're designing an environment for everybody, you've got to consider everybody. And some of those needs can conflict. So that's an issue that we try to deal with by looking at more sort of common factors. What are the common factors? What's good for everybody? And then also we try to bring in design in flexibility. So that's what we mean by generic versus specific. So there are generic design themes that we can address, like wayfinding and orientation and open plan. That can be built in, and then on top of that, it's like a second tier of design, which is the individual tailor-made approaches, because obviously, as we know, there are over 100 types of dementia, and so it's very much an individual approach to finding the right solution for identified people. So I think one of the new developments here is interest from Homes England, in design for dementia standards. And they've been tasked by the government with drawing up a brief for new housing, which obviously we're hoping that there will be new initiatives of housing coming along, a new drive behind that. And Homes England want to have a design brief like they used to have before the bonfire of the vanities, when it was done away with, obviously at the instigation of housing developers. So that design brief is going to be reintroduced, and as far as I understand it, it will include design for dementia standards, and I think that's a huge breakthrough, because once it's in there, then it's carrot and stick, isn't it? The carrot is you get more money, and the stick is you might not get any money. So that's a real driver, I think, if that comes off the way I've been told it'll come off, for housing associations in particular to change their ideas.
Bill, we need to wrap it up. We've
Okay.
got until 3. I'm so sorry. It's just that working across the whole world, really. So.
Okay. Do you want to wrap it up there, or just look at this example?
Yeah, this example is great, and then we'll wrap it up and go on.
Okay.
Thank you.
This is a project that we've been involved with the past year or so, with a community organisation, community education project actually, and the concept is to build a community which will assist people to get into productive employment. This is in a very poor part of North Liverpool, and the scheme will include an intergenerational mix of people like single parent families and older people, which in itself is going to be a challenge, obviously. So that's what it begins to look like, this co-housing design for a mixed group of people with mixed needs. So I'll leave it there. It's if people want more information on it. And thanks very much for putting up with me. Any questions?
Thank you so much. That's wonderful, Bill. I've got a question here from Martin Quirk saying, I'm curious to hear how we all, you, me, and the wider team, manage the differences in views or preferences between the people with dementia who contributed to the design of the Chris and Sally house. And I think that is a really great question, because to keep that short, I mean, apart from your amazing work with the sand play, which was wonderful, which led into that, we used a persona, didn't we? Because one of the things we tried to do was to develop generic layouts which people liked, and you so well illustrated that, didn't you, Bill, in talking about neurodiversity. We had, with the visitors to the BRE, we had a lot of feedback from people who came with whose children had autism, or people who were depressed or ADHD, and everybody felt that the house was incredibly calming. It had a very its views, the lights, the thermal regulation. It was a wonderful, wonderful house, and it was a very calming space. And I think this is something John brought up when we started talking about this, is that good design is inclusive design for everybody, isn't it? If I may say so. And then there is another thing, allowing for differences to advise on design flexibility within the book. And I think that's probably something you'll be best to. How do you liaise with that, Bill? Sort of the individual, the personalized, that was talked about so much during this day, where there is that tension between the generic and the personalization.
Well, I mean, this is not an unusual situation for us to have to deal with. You know, we've done projects over the years for communities of hundreds of families, all with different needs and aspirations, and we need to integrate that together into a coherent design. So we're building on that experience, and I think that the basic design methodology for that is a number of things. First of all, is to design the process. So we design the process for the decision making and how the decision making is going to be happening. That might be a series of different groups addressing different things, but it's possible to do it. But what you need to do is first of all identify the main topics that are going to be common. Find the common area between people. Now, we also need to build in flexibility. So, for example, in the house, if you remember, and this did cause some confusion, but we had a room next to the living room, which was called a day room. But that room could have a range of potential uses, like, for example, it could be a quiet room for somebody who is very sensitive to noise, or it could be for end-of-life care, or it could be a library or a hobby room, or, you know, it's useful to have an extra room which is different from just the standard living room and dining room. And that's a concept in design. That's a concept that we refer to as multivalency in design. So we can design one thing which has a number of different purposes, and that's one way of achieving built-in flexibility. Obviously, there's physical flexibility, and you can move walls around, or you can have knock-through panels, or you can change doors to suit people, or you can design kitchen. You can design an individual kitchen. That's no problem. It's more a case of how does the process happen, because obviously at the beginning of the development, where you've got a site, for example, or a property, and you've got a corporate client, you haven't actually got an end user group, and or in terms of individual people, and I think that's in a way where the idea, Chris and Sally's house idea of having personas actually really worked, because we had identified a user group based on research, but who are not specific in that sense.
I think they had what the beauty of the persona was that they showed the variability within and between people in different stages of dementia, didn't they? And they are described in the book in that even coming up with these sort of generic concepts of particular changes that may occur within the different stages. There is variability where people have good days or bad days and something in between, and how that would relate to their needs, to the design needs. And I think that was a really clever sort of way of working with this. And another thing that's described in the book is something that was developed by the Technical University in Delft called Know Me by Tisha van der Kammer and her collaborators. And this Know Me is Gubin Wang, who was a PhD student who developed it. Know Me is a very personalized approach which forces the architect and the designers to ask a couple of questions. It gives a tool to really come to grips with what's the history of this person, what are their likes, what are their dislikes, what makes them feel safe. And just to wrap this all up together, I think, this is something that kept on coming back in the talks, kept on coming back in your talks, this constant tension between the personalized versus the generic, the risk versus the autonomy, the stimulation versus overstimulation, privacy versus socializing, etc. And I think this is a fascinating field. It makes it very dynamic. It makes designing very dynamic, and ultimately, as you said, Bill, you need to work with the end users, and I think your work has very much shown that over the years. All your projects have always been grassroots led from the start. You've been one of the first people to do that, PPIE, to really work with the end users and ask them what they wanted, and it's been really empowering. I'm going to thank you so much, Bill. It's such a shame we don't have enough time, because I think, we could have just talked about the Chris and Sally house for, the whole day, really. But we need to move on to, I'm going to try to set up another poll. And this is related really to something you alluded to, the others all alluded to, is what is the future of this work? So we've got two amazing books. We've got Design for Dementia. We've got the Inclusive Design and Empowerment. How do we want to move on next? And so let me see how I can share that. Can I do that like this?
Well, you need to share your screen first.
Share the screen first. Here we go. So just let me share that. Here we are, Vivox dashboard, there we go. Oh, so complicated. Here we go. So the question is, if together with, all of the experts here and other people might be listening to the recording, if we were to write a white paper together, what would be core topics? What sort of ideas do you have? And if you would just write in, take that little pic, so point your camera at the squiggly thing, the QR code, otherwise click then the yellow link will come up, you press that link, and then you could put in whatever you want to, oops,
Sorry.
whatever you want to put in, whatever you think is important. If you would start doing that, I will, and you can put in multiple words if you want to. I will show the poll in a bit. I always don't want to do it too quick because otherwise people go like, ah, yes. So I first want to have it just a bit of a brainstorming, and then we can start sharing the poll. To share the poll. Can you still see it? No, you can't. There we go. Oh, that's good. This is great. I'm going to show the results. Then full screen. Can you see it? Yeah, there we go. So we can see that quite a number of things are coming up as people are writing words into this. And this is really important. And I think the number one, and that's very much something that's come up out of the discussions we've had over the day, is co-design and co-creation. And this is really a key point to take home. So this is what the white paper should be about. And it should be a very main topic about choice comes in. Let's see some of the other words. Co-design versus co-housing. Evidence-based comes up. Yeah, green care comes up here. Role of technology, very important. Intergenerational designer training. I think something that's come out of this day as well is how wonderful it was to hear people of different generations speak about this. And that's something we really try to do in both books. In the Design for Dementia, we have many early career researchers. Obviously, in the other book, the editors were early career researchers, and were really crucial in guiding us because they are the future. And at the same time, we've had people like Bob, Mary, Maggie, John, Richard, who've been in this field for so long, and we've got that whole history and the benefit of knowing about what has been tried out before. So we can see a lot of ideas for the white paper. Inclusion, very important. So here we really have aspects that came up earlier about security, the need to involve staff as well, I think, and regulations. A lot of the design falls by regulations, perceived lack of safety, for instance, with the green farms. I know that there was quite some push against that as well, where people said, well, that's not safe. And ultimately, I think some of the work by Kevin, for instance, has shown that we should be careful in implementing that too rigidly and imprisoning people because we want them to stay safe and therefore not have any experiences at all. Right, I'm going to stop this poll and I'm going to go on to the next slide. So this is really important information. We'll keep that information, obviously, and I want to start the next poll, which is that going to come up?
Yeah, you can come up on
present full screen. So who would like to be involved in this? You can put your email in here and discuss its structure. Now, I'm going to leave that open, but I'm not going to show that because obviously, if you might not want your email shared. But please, if you would like to be involved in the white paper and start having discussions about the structure, please leave your email and your name and sort of your expertise, and we'll get back to you on that one. And then the other question we had, and that's related to that, I think if I do that, the other poll will stop, is should we start an interim task force? So if you are putting your white paper in and your expertise in that, so your email, your name, your expertise, do say interim task force, yes or no, and whether you want to be part of that, because this is something that would be really great for us if you would indicate whether you would want to be part of that. And then lastly, so I think I'm needing to keep this open because otherwise
do you think if we open another poll,
let's see what
will stop
happens.
the previous
If we do
one?
that, yeah. If I do open this poll, yeah, see,
No,
the
okay.
other one stops.
No.
The last question is whether you would like to be involved for a summer school we're planning. So if you're going to get in touch with us about this one, so leave your email behind for the white paper, and then separately have a think about whether you want to be involved in a summer school on inclusive design. And if you can email that to MJ Cook, who was responsible administrator for the organization of this meeting, that would be really great. So if you would like to be involved in a summer school on inclusive design, please tell us whether you would want to be involved as a student or perhaps a trainer or provider of the input, and give your email. Obviously, if you're emailing MJ, you will provide your email, the role and the preferred time. So should that be July, August, or September?
I think we can close the previous poll and start this one because this one also needs to.
Yeah, exactly. We'll start this one so we can have.
Okay.
The other one had the
Yeah.
task force
So
in.
go on there.
So you can go here on the, you can put that on. So the summer school is.
There we are. Wants to be
Oh, what?
involved.
No, that's
No.
not the one.
This not this right one.
That one.
Yeah. Okay. I know it was just thinking.
It's this
Okay.
one.
Present for
Yeah.
that's good. No,
Stop.
no.
And oh, sorry. I'm going to open up poll again.
Reopen poll. It's just there.
Oh,
Reopen.
here it is. Yeah,
Yeah,
I
reopen.
can't see it on my thingy. Yeah.
Okay.
Oh.
And then you can go on present.
Okay, so this is the next poll. If you want to be involved on this for the summer school on inclusive design as a student or a trainer or provided, you can also put your stuff in your email, your role and a preferred time on this bit of the poll, or you can email that information to MJ, but we'll leave this open. So you can just, this is quite important for us. So we're thinking about a summer school, perhaps for people who are interested in architecture, design, the ergonomics, the psychology of the environment, and also perhaps the assessment. So at Loughborough, we have quite extensive experience on assessments of vision and hearing loss and how that interferes with interaction with the environment, with activities, and also with cognitive function and how that is affected by and can affect the interaction of aspects within the environment. And so that's how we work with the Chris and Sally House using these aspects. So I think it would be quite good to have a summer school on that. The idea is perhaps that we have, similar to today, we have several key speakers. It can be hybrid, it can be on campus, or a combination of that, and that we generate some of these ideas. So what we're hoping to do is give you a small overview of perhaps of what we've done today, and certainly to come up with an idea of this summer school on inclusive design, on the things that you talked about, and the things that came up, the white paper, the task force. So these are all ideas of how to move this forward. So if you can give us feedback on that, do you want us to set up a task force in INTERDEM, to the international organization, the European organization for people who investigate dementia? A task force could help us develop this summer school or an academy, and it could help us. One of its first outputs could be the white paper. So I think if we, are there any comments from anybody? Oh, show the QR code. The QR code is on the side.
Yeah.
You can see that there.
I think it's good now.
Oh, you've seen it now. Yeah, okay, fantastic. No other questions?
That's good. I think we've got all the comments.
We've got all the comments. Everybody filled in. Any comments from people on the day? Any comments overall, or already perhaps some input on the white paper or the summer school? Some ideas that you might have. We've still got about 15 minutes to discuss.
One of the future ideas that was written by Anne-Marie Campero was how to shift the paradigm so that co-design is a requirement of funding.
That is a really good comment. I've been part of H2020 reviews, and even many years ago, PPIE was a requirement for funding, and in fact, in the UK, it always is. It has
PPIE
been.
for the people that.
That's right.
But what is PPIE?
Exactly. So this is one of the problems. And when we worked with the council, they said, well, how do you do that then? How do you get input? And I think I would really like the summer school, and that's something that came out of that white paper as well. So how do you do it? Examples of
how do you participative research?
Yeah, exactly. How do you do co-creation?
Okay.
Yeah. So I think, and that came out as a big one, didn't it, in the word cloud? So great question. I think that's really good. And I think certainly that white paper that could really add, because there's been a lot of reviews now on, and you could see in the talks, we've all talked about very similar things like orientation and weight finding and light and color and so on, autonomy. To have the familiar, to indicate, to have the environment indicate what a meaningful activity would be there. Is that eating or sleeping or engaging?
And I think it's also about how to shift from a disability model
Yes.
to an ability model. And
Yes.
that's something that is important and that we've seen in several presentations today, and which Maggie talked about, which John talked about, which Hilda and Gesine talked about. Is basically, it's not focusing on disabilities of people, but what are they still able to do? And this is something that is really important. It goes, I think, beyond capabilities. It's something that is also driven by motivation, by aspirations of people. And so it's something that it's not just functional like capabilities, but it's also motivational, emotional, affective, and all these things.
Yeah.
So that's another point that I think we need to move on. Also how to, and I think you pointed out this to me the other day, is how to also involve people in climate change, in ecology, altogether, because we are all citizens, whether we are living with dementia or not. And I think it's important that everyone, whether we have an illness or whether we don't have an illness or whether we don't know we have an illness yet, that we are involved in these societal challenges. And I think this is quite important that we go on this too. And I don't know.
I think this is great, because this is something that came out of a trip in Africa where I gave a workshop to also launch the book there. This was in November. It is a very wonderful meeting organized by Professor Roshkalaria and Professor Gladys Maestre, and they get together people from low and middle income countries to showcase their amazing work on dementia. And one of the things, of course, that came up there was the effect of heat in aggravating symptoms, people often not really being aware of this, and that ultimately, resulting in early demise, really. So one of the things that was wonderful about that meeting was to use the traditional build in the Sahara, in many of the very hot places on the planet, like Central Java. It gets very hot, and where people work, like work of Professor Malcolm Cook also indicates, with natural buoyancy, so getting air circulation flowing, using the most prevailing winds and traditional building materials. So this work is really exciting, and I think this is something that Hilde also talks about, the diversity. I think learning from others, and really, when we talk about EDI, this is also about involving people from different cultures who can really bring a lot of input to this table. We've got long-standing experience with some of the issues that will be facing us probably worldwide.
Do Bob, Maggie, Bill, Gesine have any suggestions to make towards future research on for this white paper?
So was that me?
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, I think that it'd be very interesting to see what Homes England do, because I think that will give a legal, government-backed guidance to how these things are actually implemented. So yeah, I mean, we should liaise on that. I mean, my central thing in all of this is you can talk about these things till the cows come home, can't you? But actually getting it into production is what we're trying to do, is to change things, the way things are done. I think we've got an ideal opportunity in terms of change of government and new housing programs. But my concern is the government are very much focusing on housing numbers, but my contact with Homes England would suggest that they're also thinking about quality, which is vital. I'd rather they built a few fewer homes and built them properly. Yeah, I think I mean, is it a white paper or a green paper? That's another question.
Yeah, good point. Thank you.
Gesine, you raised your hands. You wanted to say something?
Yes, well, just for an outlook for the paper. So what I really, really liked about today was the worldwide perspective we had. So people were all over the globe. So some went to bed already and others got up early to be presenting here. For us in Europe, it was a pleasant daytime. Anyway, so the challenge will be big. We come from very different social and financial systems. We should also try to involve countries that have not been here today. So Ethan, you talked about presenting the book in Africa. Did I get that correctly? So yeah. I think, that is so important, that it's not an initiative by the people who always did it, but that we also bring new contributors to the paper. And then I think a big challenge will be to make it sweet and short and concise, with so many people wanting to contribute. And I think that is really important. But what will be the key topics, or what will be the what will we be writing about? I think that will be a very interesting or very difficult process to decide on what will be the key areas we focus on. And at the same time, how do we make it not too narrow by including other perspectives, especially from parts of the world we have not been seeing so much research from.
Yeah.
So yeah, and
Yeah.
I would really like to contribute or lead a subchapter or
Super.
whatever you need. So yep.
Fantastic. That's really good.
Yes, and the
Felix-
specific the African countries. I'm very sorry I fell into this trap.
Oh,
There's
yeah.
a comment that we should be specific. Yes, it's not
Yeah.
one.
Absolutely. And Felix, this when I went to Kenya, many of the African countries were involved in that, from Egypt to Tunisia to Tanzania to South Africa, so Nigeria, Niger. So these, but also from Indonesia, from India, from Bangalore. So I think, and I really appreciate what you're saying, Gesine. And this was something we did try to do in here, but it was difficult to get enough people together. So in the last chapter, I tried to include some of the people I'd worked with before and showcase their work in Indonesia and in Japan and India, to show very person-friendly, but not person-centered practices. It was, and to talk about these instances.
Maggie, you raised your hand earlier.
Yeah, I was going to say, I think in order to affect change, you need to work through the regulatory systems. And so figuring out how to add something to regulatory language that isn't onerous, that doesn't say design it this way, but just says you have to be able to show that you have considered the needs and abilities of individuals who are living with dementia in your healthcare and or housing design.
Excellent.
Okay.
Thank
Yeah,
you so
good.
much for that, Maggie, because one of the things that came up, didn't it, Bill, was initially we wanted to develop a set of guidelines. My partner is a builder and he had a hissy fit because he said we have to jump through so many hoops already. And so we talked a little bit about Part M plus for a while, and then it seemed to be the problem is you very quickly then get into a tick box, and people can just very quickly go, yeah, I've done that. And then the question is, who really checks this, and who are these people who are going to check it? I think Bob wants to say something about that. Bob, do you want to add to that, or have another comment? But that's a great point.
Right, we need to put your microphone on, Bob. There we are.
Yeah, no, I just wanted to say that I think it's important in thinking about a white paper or a green paper to recognise the tremendous work that must have gone into the Alzheimer report for ADI. And I think there's just a risk that you're going to replicate that unless you take that as your starting point and say, right, what needs to happen, for all the good stuff in there to actually come into practice, and maybe that's what you need to focus on, and perhaps as Maggie says, if you're going to look at regulatory systems, that's going to differ so much from country to country and so on. So perhaps you need to dive down deep into some specific areas in order to do that. I think it's quite a tricky thing. I think, not to just reinvent the excellent wheel that people have already done with that and just produce another document that everybody thinks is wonderful, but, how do you actually move the field on?
Yeah.
I'm sorry, that's not very constructive, but, I think
it's
where
very
you
good.
need to start
The
from.
thing is, I think we also need to, because on the ADI report, which was really brilliant, and Richard did a very good job on it, and was helped by John, and you were in it too. And there is a lot of things that were very, very interesting in there. Now I think also that the COVID also raised a lot of questions about taking care of people living with dementia, but also elderly people altogether. It also raised some questions about, basically, do we need to be dementia specific, or is it just being friendly to people altogether? And this will work for people living with dementia, for people living with Parkinson's disease, for people living with Lewy body dementia. All these different conditions that affect old age, and I think it's important to address it. But as we were talking also about earlier, it also concerns other types of conditions like autism, and I think it's just something that it's really interesting to address. So maybe be more inclusive in terms of who do we address it to, and also see lifetime evolutions. Then I think you're right. We should think about the scope. We're going to write this green and white paper with here. We mustn't replicate what has been done in the ADI report, and I think this is very important to take into consideration.
Yeah, thank you. Would it be an idea to look at best practice? You said, there've been like there's a comment about South Korea, where you're looking at cost benefits, so you're implementing change, and that actually then has a benefit, which ultimately comes back to the government, in terms of savings on other aspects. So I think we could look at, I don't know if there are specialists who would be able to look at these sort of guidelines across the world in terms of policy. It reminds me a little bit of a book I did earlier for Martin on dementia prevention, which I also have here, and I can show you. It is this is why Martin said go and work with Kevin and so on. And I know a little bit about a lot of different things, but this book was something I know a little bit more about. So this is about dementia prevention, and what we did here is we looked at the state of the art, but also how do you measure things? For instance, if we're talking about, like Hilda talked about, research, what are the gold standard techniques? So rather than to come up with something you think is a memory test, there's good stuff out there you can just get off the shelf, and it's actually validated, but to show that it does improve memory, and that's user friendly.
And there are a lot of, there are a lot of approaches like lifestyle redesign, for example, which can be very interesting in supporting people living with dementia, whether in institutions or at home. And that can also be one of the leading aspects of designing these places for these people. When we see that, homely environments seem to be the norm now, the standards, why? And is it part of lifestyle redesign? Is it part of people engaging in activities of daily living and all these things? And how does it contribute to benefit quality of life and the conditions of everyone? So I think this as it was mentioned earlier also, and I think by several presentations, whether it was Maggie, whether it was Hilda, whether it was Gesine, whether it was John New, is that we need to take everything into account, whether it's the organization, it's the family environment, the social environment, person, caring about the people. So I think we need to take all this in account and not only focus maybe on design, and maybe just focus. Design has to be part of one of them, but maybe not just one of them altogether. So it's just something that has to be thought of maybe differently. And I don't know. Yeah, it's just waiting ideas.
I think there's lots of ideas. I think there are 3 elements to me that came out for this white paper, perhaps, and then we can wrap it up because it's been quite a long day for everybody. So I think there was one that Hilda, that's been mentioned in the word cloud. That was about co-design and co-creation. How do you do that? Best practice of. Does that replicate the ADI report, Bob? Do you think? The how to? I know there's some in that, but could we have an update of that? Would that be beneficial, do you think? The how to do the co-design, the co-creation. That could be one element. Another element.
Yeah, sure. Sorry for the delay. It takes a while for the microphone to unmute.
Oh, sorry.
But yes, no, I think that would be a one way forward. Yeah.
Because that was the question we had a lot from councils. It's like, yeah, we're fine to do that, but how? The other one was research, how to do that. So what is actually out there? How can you do valid qualitative and quantitative research? And then there is the economics, the cost benefit. How do you do that? And, you know, you can use QALYs. There are, you know, within medicine, you have the QALYs, you look at the quality of life and you give that a number. But it could also be in cost savings, like Clyde Williams has done amazing work with person-centered approaches, where he said, okay, I implemented that in the nursing homes. It promoted staff well-being, and people were less likely to leave, but also they had much less need for medical interference. And I think it saved about 4,500 quid per patient a year. Now that's because, you know, not a huge amount, but it's still enough. And most importantly, he hadn't actually given a number on staff well-being and patient, you know, and resident well-being. So I think, and that's a really nice bit of research by Clyde Williams, where he actually put a number on it. So you can now say, hang on, this is what we're saving. I think
Hassan Rukayaya wanted to, which is one of the participants, wanted to raise his hand, and please feel free to ask a question.
Hi, I'm chiming in from Northern Virginia here. I'm sorry, I joined a little bit late, so I missed a lot of your discourse. I had an early meeting, but
It's fine.
you know, oftentimes I feel like engineers get left out of these very crucial information when it comes to design. You know, is there a way you guys have included, you know, life safety measures and, you know, things that very obviously affect these patients, like HVAC. I did a lot of hospital designs in my work when I used to work in California, and you know, these conversations were very essential when it came to you know, patients who are dealing with dementia or even children with cancer, like all these like HVAC, lighting system, and even plumbing. So, and you know, in my firm right now, we're really trying to have an integrative process where we're trying to involve engineers into these design conversations. So, you know, what have you, and maybe you have talked about this during the discourse, and I really apologize, I missed it, but you know, what are some of your thoughts on that?
We haven't, and thank you for actually raising this. And because I've been working on a nursing home lately, and I was talking with some of the engineers doing all the geothermia, and when they asked me what I was doing, what I was doing in the team, I was it was a bit weird for them to have a psychologist on the team. And when I explained to them what I was doing, all of a sudden it came, well, it made sense to them, and all of a sudden their work was different than what they were doing 10 minutes before. And they understood that really even these very, very technical stuff were important for the nursing home to come out and to think of for the design of the nursing home. So I think you're right. We need to address all these technical stuff. Well, I don't know if I answered your question, or if it's that sort of, or that was what you wanted to raise.
Yeah, we had in this other book, we do have engineers. So Mike Riley is an engineer and an architect, and he specialized in thermal comfort, and so did Malcolm Cook. So they looked at keeping homes comfortable in terms of indoor environments. So looking at oxygen levels, humidity, damp is a huge problem in the UK, and so there was a lot of engineering involved in that for these individual homes. Right, I think unfortunately I'd love to stay forever, but we need to wrap up, and I would like to thank everybody involved so much. And if we can, we'll share some resources with those of you, we will share resources with those of you, certainly those people who've signed up to be part of the Interim Task Force. If we were to set that up, that could then lead to the white paper. We've discussed the contents. Any other ideas would be great. I think Bob's comment is super useful. Don't replicate what's out there, or if we can update it in any meaningful way, that would be great. And then would you like to be part of the summer school where we could further work on these issues raised?
Yeah.
I think, you know,
Yeah.
these are such great issues. How do you do co-creation? Can we have role play, for instance? Can we work with people with best practice? And that would be really fun.
Yeah, I think all these things should be
Yeah.
addressed whether in the white paper or
Yeah.
in the.
But
and the
could also
summer
be then answered in
Yeah.
summer school, right? Yeah. and
Right,
in the
well,
class.
I think we wish to thank everybody warmly for participating in this conference, this webinar. Thank you to all that woke up really early. Thank you to all that went to bed really late. We tried to be the most inclusive in terms of time schedules for everyone, so that it wouldn't be too painful for anyone. Obviously, we cannot satisfy everyone. And we have recorded everything. I think we're going to try and cut out the presentations so that we can put them online, so that everyone, because I've had a lot of people that asked me if we were going to record these presentations. So we have recorded them. We are going to cut them out and diffuse them a bit later. So there
Yeah,
you are.
we'll hope to put them on the website.
And I think
so
it's
you
a
can-
great contribution, and it helps a lot to understand everything.
Yeah, and I particularly like to thank Ahmed Aladawi, who helped us with the IT and the IT people here. Despite that, we still managed to, sometimes get lost a little bit. But thank you so much for your patience and in particular for your input. It's been really great. Thank you very much.
Bye-bye.
Okay, take care.
Yes, bye then.
Bye.
Bye.
Just stop the recording. Bye.